All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Mr. Forrest Richardson, the president of Forrest Richardson Golf Course Architects. So, Forrest, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got involved and what you do with the company?
Well, I'm a golf course architect, so our business is designing golf courses, remodeling golf courses, reimagining golf courses, and then we also do a lot of land planning. And I've been doing this for close to 4 decades, so I have a long career in the business. And it's really an art as much as a business. So there's a science part of it and an art part of it. And
Right,
as golf architects, we like to say that, we have one, if not the biggest canvas in the world of artists. And, to see the whole thing, you have to be in an airplane at 20,000 or 30,000 feet to really see the whole golf course. And of course, most people, that's not how they see a golf course, but that's how we have to look at a golf course.
right. Yeah, that's like definitely an interesting take on golf course designing. You never really think about what the view looks like for you guys, other just the player. How do you approach that when you're in your job? Do you guys actually go up in helicopters and in planes when you start planning the land?
Well, I have. I mean, typically, though, the way that I would say that the way we first look at sites is very often on paper. We're usually sent by a potential developer, property owner, someone wants to create a golf course. That it usually starts by sending us the topographical map, aerial photo, property plat maps, and ownership maps, and that's in my career, and I think most of us that do this, there's only a few hundred around the world that are golf course architects, but that's how we usually get introduced to sites. And then, of
Right.
course, our we're just clamoring to get there and see the land in person. And that's really the first design look at the property, if you will. I mean, we can look at it on paper and Google Earth and all of that, but the real test becomes when we get on the property or get on the golf course that exists that maybe wants to be reimagined or remodeled, and we're actually able to see and appreciate all the different things the land has to offer, and not just the land, but the views. We call them territorial views. When you're on a golf course, you're seeing mountain ranges and valleys and rivers and oceans and lakes
Right.
and in some cases, of course, neighborhoods and cities. I've
Right.
worked on golf courses that are right in the middle of urban environments, which is wonderful because they're like central parks, right, to cities.
Right.
But when we get on site is really when the magic happens. That's the first little incubation of real artwork and design.
Gotcha. And as the president, what does your day look like? What are you doing?
Well, today is a pretty good day. I'm doing a podcast with you, which is fun. And but my day started kind of early. I have a client who's traveling in Europe right now, so I was on the phone with him early in order to fit his schedule. So we had about an hour meeting, and then one of my design associates is working on a project, so I had a remote meeting with him. And then I'm in between that, I'm trying to uh, get busy with some solutions on a remodel of a golf course, and so that's right here on my desk right now. And then later today, besides completing that, I've got some administrative things to do and some travel plans to take care of, and then I think the real question you're asking is what am I responsible for? And really, besides running the company, which is just my wife and I. We're the only core employees, and then most of our other resources, in our case, are contract employees. They're people we work
Gotcha.
with on different projects. But I'm responsible now for right now, I think it's about 18 separate active projects. And when I say active projects, they're not all, fortunately, being constructed because that would be overload. I've got a
Right.
couple. I've got three projects right now that are in construction mode, which is very intensive because I'm making a lot of trips to the site, to
Right.
work with the contractor. But then the other 15 are either in planning or conceptual stage or land planning stage. Some of them are in construction documents, which is in our world when we're done with the design, and then we're taking those designs and putting them in the language and the format that they can be built. And so, and then there are other phases too. There's, feasibility phases. Like, I have a couple of projects right now that are in the process of should we do something or shouldn't we do something.
Right.
And then we do a fair amount of uh, study and analysis of projects. So I've got a couple of projects in that stage right now. Two of them up in the Bay Area, San Francisco area, where we're helping golf course owners understand, in one case, the historical implications because the golf course is on the National Register of Historic Places. And so, since I get involved in a lot of older classic golf courses, that's a specialty. And then the other one is really in the analysis stage of trying to kind of figure out whether the owner should change the way they're operating the golf courses. And the reason I'm involved in
Right.
that is because the operations of a course is you really can't separate from the physical course. In other words, they go hand in hand. So in a nutshell, I'm involved in these 18 projects. It might be a few more than that are maybe ready to go. And so there's a lot on my plate. And what I need to do day to day is just make sure that I'm on target, on schedule, and doing what needs to be done because in my world, virtually every project has a growing season, right? So we can't
Right.
just say, oh well, we'll just wait 3 months, because in Arizona, for example, in Phoenix, we're not growing grass in the winter. We're growing grass in the warmer months, but and then
Right.
in other parts of the world, it might be different or whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's impressive. And so being the president, having 17 or 18 projects you said at a time, and it's only you and your wife as the core employees. How do you handle all those projects at once if you two are the only ones running it?
Well, a lot of it is first of all having a good team. So the people that I've worked with in some cases for more than 20 years, they're trusted contract employees, resources, project managers, estimators, um, uh, consultants of different varieties like irrigation and
Gotcha.
agronomy, which is the turf part of things. So, all totaled, there's probably 25 really, really trusted people that I've worked with. And I try to focus on the design and the
Mhm.
creative part and sort of like a orchestra leader, what I'm doing is making sure that things are getting done in the sequence and the timeliness that they need to be. So I'm not, don't mean to paint a picture that it's all roses because sometimes it does get a little um,
Right.
kind of busy, and that's true, I think, of any um, architectural consultancy where you're dealing with right brain. Again, that gets back to the science and the art, right? So there's right brain on the
Right.
the art part, and then there's left brain, perhaps maybe on more of the scientific, pragmatic parts, and sorting that out and keeping a good pace with all of that stuff. I've just over the years I've sort of learned I'm not perfect at it, but I've sort of learned that that's the management part of what I do, which is sometimes I think when I was starting my career, I just assumed that all of that stuff would either get done by someone else or it would just work itself out. And then I really quickly realized that, oh, okay, this takes a lot of work. It doesn't just happen, and there aren't just endless people there to fill in the the,
Right.
the
Right.
gaps, right?
Yeah, that's definitely good strategy to have. You need to know how to delegate and bring on the right team members. It's definitely important. You don't want some guy that doesn't know what he's doing to manage the project of a new golf
Well,
course.
it happens, we're all humans. So I mean, we it's not like our world in golf, even though being a golf course architect is the greatest opportunity and gift that I think anyone could be given. It's just a wonderful profession, especially if you like golf and you like being creative. But it does, things do happen in our world that just like they do in any, I mean, things go
Right.
wrong. You find stuff when you're building a course that you didn't expect. And then to your point, every once in a while, you get, like the square peg in a round hole situation where maybe
Right.
you don't have the perfect married merriment of consultant,
Mhm.
you don't have that perfect all the time. But I try hard, and I think, but again, I think people sometimes they just need to look at golf course architecture as like any other business endeavor. It has its ups and downs, and so what you try to do is make it go as smoothly as possible. And at the end of the day, try to make it creative. And the real proof in the pudding for me and for my clients is whether the course is enjoyed and the finished product is good
Right.
and it meets all the objectives and everything.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's important. And speaking of ups and downs, let's go into the trends in the golf industry you're seeing. Are there any major trends or shifts that you're seeing that's affecting your business?
Well, yes, I think the biggest one is, and I've been a proponent of this for many years now, probably at least the last decade, of really trying to push the envelope with the format and the layout of golf courses. In other words, we golf has never been a one size fits all where there's only so much, like a championship golf course, for example. A lot of people think of that as about 7,000 yards, 18 holes, um, a mixture of par fours, fives, and threes, usually with 9-hole loops that come back to the clubhouse, although not always.
Mhm.
But today we're seeing there's always been short courses, not always, but I mean, they've been popular for 100 years. And when I say short courses, that's where the magic happens. Is once you get below that regulation uh, threshold, there
Mhm.
are no rules. You can have different number of holes. You can have 12 holes, 15 holes, 9 holes, 6 holes. 20. I'm doing a 20 hole par three course right now. And then
Really?
also the distribution of par, it can be all par three holes or it can be a short course. A term that people know is executive course, which was coined back in the 1950s by a guy named William Mitchell, who was a golf architect who reasoned that the executive didn't have time to play 18 long holes. And so
Right.
he created this idea of the executive course, which was a course of maybe 4,000 yards, that
Right.
still had some par fours, maybe even a par five, but it was a way to appease the executive, as he reasoned. Today, I think we use the term precision for those courses. But I guess to answer your question, there's a huge movement right now in golf to think outside the box and not take up all the land
Mhm.
and use all the water and use all of the labor and the inputs, and to think of golf as something that also can fit the consumer's idea of what the ideal time is
Right.
to play a round of golf. So let's say a round of golf is 4.5 or 5 hours. And by the time you arrive and get ready, and you might have a breakfast, or afterwards you might have lunch. I mean, it could even be 6 hours or more, that someone is investing in a round of golf. And
Right.
those parameters are changing. So a new consumer might want to go play a 5 hour or more round of golf. And I'm sure that will always be an important part of the game. But they also might want to, at 4:30 or 5 after work, go play a 2 hour format or go to a place like Top Golf or someplace similar and enjoy
Hmm.
golf for an hour and a half, or a putting course, and so this whole movement of these short, alternative, different formats of the game are really, I think, taking golf by storm. And from a business perspective, it's almost doubled the amount of people that we now can call golfers. So they're
Yeah.
really divided into two um, baskets. One is the core golfer who plays on real grass golf courses, and the things that we envision to be a golf course of any
Hmm.
size or shape. And the other is an off-course player, someone that uses a simulator or goes to a Top Golf or plays miniature golf or pop stroke, or might go to a big putting course and just hang out and enjoy time with friends and kids and people of all ages. And so that's kind of called the off-course player. And right now in the United States, we have, give or take, about 25 million of both of those baskets. So it's a huge, huge opportunity for golf. And the way I kind of put it in perspective is it gets into the semantics, of course, but is a golfer an individual who holds a club and swings a club and hits a ball, or putts a ball or whatever? And I think that we're finding that, yes, those are golfers. They're just two different categories of golfers, and the blending of those categories has been fascinating. So we're seeing real grass golfers that play a course
Right.
migrate, and many of those really avid golfers have simulators they've built in their house or their garage or their basement, or they take their family to a place to enjoy indoor simulators in the winter, for example, in the
Yep.
where you can't play golf outdoors. We're seeing those people play simulators. We're seeing them go to Top Golf. We're seeing them go to the putting venues, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the other side, the basket of people that are maybe not avid golfers, but really enjoy playing miniature golf, are kind of coming into real golf going, hey, this is kind of fun. I enjoy this. I'd like to go try the real thing. And so that's been really good for the game. And even though I don't sell equipment, I'm not here to sell golf balls and golf clubs and gloves and visors and hats and sweaters and shoes
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. What I do, of course, helps drive that economy. And that's
Right.
also the beautiful thing about the game of golf is it's not just it's the economy of golf is everything from fashion, and there are hundreds and hundreds of brands in golf. Um, I mean, Nike, for example, still has an incredibly high, they don't make clubs and balls anymore, but they still are in the fashion and clothing part of golf.
Right.
And then you have tourism, I mean, Marriott, which is the largest hotel franchise in the world. Golf is a huge part of Marriott because
Right.
they have many properties that golf is the core attraction, right? And
Mm.
so the game of golf and the economy of golf is massive. And again, even though I don't sell that equipment, it's really exciting to see the game flourish with getting the club in people's hands, because that's really the bridge that gets people into the game.
Yeah. You're 100% right there. Without golf courses and new renovations, there'd be no golf industry. You got to have the courses. You got to have the pristine places to go play, or else you wouldn't have any of these other companies. Well, I guess a fun question for you. If you had a magic wand that would solve any possible problem that might be slowing down your business, what would you make go away and why?
Well, probably some of the unfortunate perceptions of golf that are out there, especially, we see it in the media sometimes with people that don't understand the game. They just assume that golf takes up a lot of acreage, it wastes water, it uses chemicals and fertilizers, and it's bad for the environment. Those are the things that you oftentimes hear. So the interesting part is that if you really get time to spend with some of those people, I call them golf bashers, if you will.
Mm.
If you really get to spend time with them, number one, you'll find out that most of them don't really understand the game. So they have a
Right.
perception that is not often really grounded in reality. So, for example, just one little tidbit, if you ask someone, let's say that they say, oh, golf uses so much water and it uses to keep it green, which is a fallacy in the beginning, by the way, because golf is all full of yellows and browns and greens and off greens, and it's kind
Right.
of like the seasons. It's a natural experience, but their perception is to keep it green, it needs fertilizer and chemicals, and it uses water and it wastes water and it's a waste of land and all of that. Well, not only does that person typically not know a lot about golf, but first thing I might ask them is, well, okay, in the United States, how much of our lawn area, the lawns that we mow,
Yep.
is golf? How much is golf? And they'll inevitably say something like, I don't know, 15% or 20% or something. Well, no, it's under 4%. Okay, so if you take all the lawn area in the United States and you add in all the churches and schools and soccer fields and road medians and parks and everything that's and front lawns, people have their own lawns, whatever. Golf is a tiny, tiny little percentage of it. And the benefit, unlike some of those smaller areas, which I think are still beneficial in many ways, but unlike those smaller areas, a golf course is typically maybe 150 acres or at least it's more than a few acres generally.
Right.
Those areas represent everything from wildlife habitat to wetlands. They allow green space, they cool the temperature, they provide views. There are little breaks in the urban landscape. And so I mean that's the first thing I might say, but my magic wand would be not so to get rid of those people. That's not that's not the I think the way I would describe it is it would be nice to get them all in one place and just be able to have a dialogue to say, well, a lot of the things you believe and you've been told and maybe you didn't grow up playing golf or knowing much about it, you drive by a golf course and your perception is that it's one thing when it's not. Or you look at television and you think that all golf courses are like Augusta National, or all golf courses are like TV golf. And of course, the reality is that golf is played by many more blue collar, hardworking people around the world than the elite level of golfers and the uber wealthy, individual that enjoys
Right.
a country club life. And then, you just keep going down the list. Golf courses are almost always at the bottom of communities where all the drainage from rooftops and vehicles and roadways and factories and the big fairgrounds and everything, all of that runoff in our communities, not all of it, but an awful lot of it, if you really study it, ends up probably on a golf course, where the drainage all goes. And then the magic is that all those little blades of grass, the billions and trillions of blades of grass, filter the water as it then makes its way back into the ground. And by the way, in golf, we borrow water. It's not 100% used, just like the ski industry. They make snow. They borrow the water. They're not they
Right.
certainly they're using a little bit of it, but they're borrowing the water. And so there's all of these things that I would love to be able to have a dialogue with people. And golf is trying to get better too. Yes, we use fertilizer. Yes, we use certain pesticides, but none of them are outside of the federal government or around the world, the European Union. None of them are outside of the realm of safety. These are all proven agents. And in golf, they are applied with great regulatory oversight. So it's not
Right.
always the case in agriculture. That's another fallacy. In other words, look at the amount of agriculture around the world, and a lot of times all the chemicals, if you will, or fertilizers that are applied to our farmland around the world are totally subsidized, number one, so there's no incentive to use less in many cases. And number two, the regulation is minuscule compared to the way it is in golf. So in golf, for example,
Right.
in the United States and Canada, almost every golf course, whether it's a pesticide or any sort of agent being applied to the golf course, is under strict regulations and licensing and things like that. Not so, not true of the individual homeowner. So that's one thing to think about is kind of scary to me is that, the homeowner can go into Home Depot and buy a weed killer and might not read the bottle, okay, and isn't trained to apply the weed killer and might
Hmm.
might think, hey, if I mix a little more, I'll kill more weeds, okay, and
Right.
and 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 that happens millions of times a week in the United States. And that is far scarier to me than a regulated application of any agent on a golf course. And by the way, golf courses are using less and less, much more organics in golf courses. It's simply good business. I mean, golf doesn't want to be bad for anybody. We want to be good,
Right.
you know. And back to the business side of things, golf employs an awful lot of people. Okay, so you talk about economy and business. Golf is a huge, huge, huge business, um, and an employment factory, right? So it's not just the people working on the golf course, but it's the people delivering chicken wings and, delivering sand and turf supplies and, cleaning the carpets and all of that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on the industry as well. I would have thought you would have gone down the route of, oh, golf is boring, or it's only for older people, or but that's definitely a good perspective that some people do have the perspective that golf is bad for the environment. And that's definitely
Well, I
learned
think
something, and
it's
that's
a,
great.
it's a hard one sometimes to convince people of because they don't want to hear it, right? And they
Hmm.
think they have the answers. It's a little easier to reason with people when they say, "Oh, golf's just an old white man sport," for example, which is,
Right.
certainly not true anymore.
Right.
And I'm not so sure it was ever really true. If you look at the pictures going back to the early 1800s
Right.
in Scotland, you will see, Victorian women dressed up to play the game and enjoying the game of golf. And also over the years, there's been a lot of kids involved in the game, that have come into the
Hmm.
game. And Francis Ouimet, the youngest player ever to win the U.S. Open, got involved in golf at an early age. There's a great movie about Francis Ouimet and his career and life, and I think that's an easier argument because you can say, well, no,
Right.
people of various backgrounds now play the game of golf, and they always have, but it's even more robust today. We have more women playing. We have more people of color and diversity playing. We have disabled people playing. And people are playing into their 90s or more because of great health care compared to,
Hmm.
maybe to 30, 40 years ago. Um, and then you have more kids coming into the game, lots of really, really great programs for kids.
Right. Yeah, it's great. Golf is definitely going in the right direction with including everybody and getting more people involved, especially since 2020. It's looking great. Look at the turnout for the Ryder Cup this year. Looks amazing. I
Hmm.
guess back to business here. Where do you guys want to be in the next 6 to 12 months? What's that look like for you guys?
Well, in my world, it's just finishing work we have. We
Hmm.
always have work in the pipeline, and by pipeline, I mean we have on one side of the scale, we have leads, right, that are things we know about and are kind of have, a little bit of focus on to try to figure out if there's a potential assignment there. And
Hmm.
then we have things that are, let's say, work that we've already finished phase one, which is kind of the early design. And now maybe the client is trying to get the financing and the approvals and what we call the entitlements in place. The entitlements being, do they need approvals? Do they need biological approvals or government approvals or zoning approvals or whatever it might be. And then, of course, then the financing part of it. So the scale of our in the next 6 months or year, we're looking at finishing work and completing it, getting it done and ready and open, which is always fun but also challenging because golf courses are like gardens. You can't
Right.
fool Mother Nature, so we need to have the right weather and cooperation to be able to bring the golf course online. It's not just like it comes out of a factory. Well, I shouldn't
Right.
say that. I mean, if we use artificial turf, which is not for a whole golf course, but I mean for a small compact thing, we can
Right.
instantly get it open. So I think in the next 6 months or more, what we're looking to do is it's just a balancing act between finishing things and then also realizing some of this work that's in the pipeline that we
Yeah.
want to get over, get to the point where we can get into the fun part of it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And in terms of you mentioned leads in your pipeline, is that something you're always looking to add more projects to your schedule, or are you just kind of
Yeah,
waiting for
well,
people to come to you?
no, I mean, it's a combination. I mean, as my career has moved along, it's different certainly than I was working in the beginning of my career, where I was, um, the reality and necessity was that I had to, be extremely proactive to land projects and be considered for projects. That's still the case, but the benefit is, as you get more projects and then get you meet more people and you have more network, if you will, where people are saying, oh, well, give Forrest Richardson a call. He's perfect for that project. That is the benefit. So what my goal is it's really trying to convert the right projects, the ones that make the most sense for me,
Gotcha.
not only for me as a golf course architect, but for me also as a individual to be able to fulfill the kinds of work that I want to do.
Right.
And that's something that really I don't, you hear about it occasionally in certain endeavors in business where someone starts out and they only do one kind of project and it's perfect and everything, whatever. But more often than not, what happens is you start doing something, you get pretty good at it, and as you move through your life in that business, you start to hone in on projects that are kind of self-fulfilling and business fulfilling.
Right.
Perhaps they're more profitable, they're more rewarding. That's just the way things work, I mean, I think acting is a good example. I mean, very rarely do you hear an actor, get in front of a camera and say, oh yeah, I started out when I was in my early 20s and immediately I was being considered for major roles and Academy Awards and Emmys and things like that.
Right.
What you normally hear is exactly what I'm saying, and that is that, hey, it was really tough in the beginning. I had to audition and I had to really pound the pavement and I got little roles, and then finally, as time marched on, now I'm like somebody, right? So
Right.
I think that's certainly in my case, that's what I've noticed is that as time has gone on, some of my priorities now are not just getting the work, but is really making sure I try to get the right work.
Right. That's very valuable. Yeah, you don't want to be spending time on something that's not going to be valuable to you or something that doesn't
Well,
fit
we all do.
your
We all
expertise.
do. It's part of life, and
Right.
and that's kind of the balance, right? Is that sometimes I mean, I like to work, right? So I have always in my career probably chased or landed things that, maybe weren't perfectly suited for me, but it's part of the fun, It's like, hey, I want to do that, this is
Right.
what I do, so I want to do that.
Right. Right. Well, listen, Forrest, this has been amazing. Before we wrap it up today, is there any message you would want to take away from today's message to leave with the audience?
Well, I think from a business perspective, again, I think that's the biggest takeaway is that golf is a big business around the world. It's touched lives in many ways. It raises money for charity. You know, the professional tournaments that occur on virtually every continent, they're always uh, grounded in philanthropic outcomes, right? So when
Right,
we see golf on TV, whether it's the Masters or the Ryder Cup or any of the national championships around the world, or the tournaments sponsored by corporations, the reality is that a lot of money is being raised for good causes. And
right,
then there's the entertainment part of it, the fashion part of it, the equipment part of it, the tourism part of it, the golf course architect part of it. There's the food and beverage part of it. There's the instruction part of it. There's
right,
the turf care part of it. And I think is just nothing else like it. The economy of golf is not to be taken lightly. And then
right,
from the last message is there's very few things in the world, in the business world, that you can say are truly sustainable. And I'm not saying that, of course we hear all the time, I mean, the hotel chain wants you to think they're sustainable, or the airline wants you to think they're sustainable. And to some degree, yes, they probably are. But if you really look at the three legs of the sustainability stool, you've got the social aspect of it. Well, that's easy in golf, right? Because we
right,
we check that box pretty easily. I mean, you spend 4 hours or more with some people actually communicating and talking and walking and
right,
taking a hike. That's pretty valuable. On the economic side, there's no question, right? It's a huge business, and so the last remaining leg of the stool is the environmental side. And I that's what I was getting at with my magic wand. I think on the environmental side, when you really dial it in and you think about it, golf, it has a great story to tell because it's open space, it's a sanctuary, it's habitat, it's you get all of these benefits to it. And I'm not saying it couldn't be better, but it truly is, I think, the whole world of golf is really a sustainable model. It's got everything
right.
going for it. It's part physical, part mental, part financial.
That's great. Yeah, definitely many, many, many aspects to the golf industry. As you said, it's huge and it employs so many people. Forrest, I really appreciate your time today. I thank you for being on the podcast and I think we've all learned something from you today.
Well, great. I appreciate it. It's great being with you, and uh, keep your head down and swing gently.
Thanks, Forrest. Take care.
All right. Take care.